I remember the hymn stopping before I did. One moment the choir was finishing the last line. The sound of the organ filling the church the way it always had. The next moment the room tilted slightly, like someone had shifted the floor a few inches to the left. At first I thought it was just dizziness. I held the edge of the pew and waited for it to pass. It didn't. The lights blurred. Voices changed shape around me. Someone said my name. Then the floor came up very quickly. When I woke again, it wasn't really waking. More like drifting through thick water. There were voices, not familiar ones. Blood pressures dropping. "Call the surgeon." Something pressed against my arm. A mask covered my mouth. I remember trying to ask for my daughter. Not because I needed her in that moment, but because that's what people say when things become serious. Call my daughter. The words never came out properly. Then the darkness folded back in. The surgeon told me later what happened. Apparently I collapsed halfway through the service. A retired nurse from the congregation recognized the signs quickly. The ambulance arrived within minutes. By the time I reached the hospital, the doctors had already decided surgery couldn't wait. They needed consent, so they did what hospitals always do. They called the emergency contact, my daughter. The first call went to voicemail. Then another, and another. The surgeon showed me the record days later while explaining things gently. 47 calls. None answered. 3 days passed while I slept. A coma, they said later, though the word sounds heavier than the experience itself. For me it was just absence. Then one morning the world returned slowly. Not all at once. First the ceiling lights. Then the quiet hum of machines. Then the feeling that my body had been replaced with something stiff and unfamiliar. A nurse noticed my eyes open. "Oh good," she said softly. Her voice sounded relieved in a professional way. She asked a few simple questions to test my awareness. My name, the date, where I was. It took effort, but I answered. When she finished checking the monitors, she placed my phone on the table beside the bed. "You might want this when you feel stronger." Then she left the room. For a while I just stared at the ceiling. Eventually I reached for the phone. The screen lit up with notifications, messages from church members, missed calls from unknown numbers. And then I saw the photo. My daughter standing on a bright white beach. Sunglasses, wind in her hair, a group of friends behind her all smiling toward the camera. The caption read, "Family trip, no stress, no drama." I looked at the timestamp. It had been posted the day after my surgery. The room was very quiet. I didn't feel anger exactly, just something slow and heavy settling into place. Later that afternoon the surgeon came in to check my progress. He explained the procedure carefully, using diagrams on a tablet. "You were very fortunate people acted quickly," he said. I nodded. Before leaving, he hesitated slightly. "We tried contacting your daughter many times." "I know," I said. He seemed relieved that I wasn't asking for details. Recovery after surgery moves strangely. Time stretches and compresses at the same time. One morning a hospital administrator visited my room with paperwork, standard forms, insurance updates, post-surgery care plans. Eventually she reached a section that required updating emergency contacts. "We need someone we can reach immediately if necessary," she explained. I looked down at the form. My daughter's name sat there already printed. For a long moment I didn't move the pen. The administrator waited patiently. She was used to pauses like this. Finally I crossed the name out. "There's a neighbor," I said. "Mrs. Alvarez. She lives 2 houses down." I wrote the number slowly. The administrator nodded and added a note to the system. "Would you also like the hospital social worker listed for recovery coordination?" she asked.
"Yes,"
I said. The pen felt lighter when I set it down, not dramatic, just different. 2 days later my daughter finally called. Apparently someone from church had mentioned my hospitalization during a conversation with one of her friends. Her voice arrived through the phone sharp with panic. "Mom, why didn't anyone tell me?" I leaned back against the hospital pillow. "They tried," I said calmly. There was a long silence on the line. "I was on a trip," she said quickly. "My phone wasn't always with me." I didn't argue. She asked questions about the surgery, about the doctors, about when I would be discharged. Her concern sounded real, but it also sounded new, like something she had only just realized she might need to feel. Finally, she said quietly, "Why didn't you call me when you woke up?" I looked at the window beside my bed. Late afternoon light spread across the floor in a soft square. "I was recovering," I said. Another pause. Then she asked the question that mattered more than the others. "Am I still your emergency contact?" I didn't answer immediately. The machines beside my bed continued their steady rhythm. "I made some changes," I said, "to make things easier for everyone." She breathed in slowly. I could almost hear the moment the meaning reached her. Not rejection. Not punishment, just a shift. Something small but permanent. "I see," she said. We stayed on the phone a little longer after that. The conversation moved carefully, like two people walking across unfamiliar ground. When the call ended, the room returned to quiet again. Outside the window the sky was beginning to darken. For the first time since the surgery, I felt something close to clarity. Love doesn't always disappear when disappointment arrives. Sometimes it simply changes shape, and sometimes, quietly, it learns new boundaries.